Hi, and welcome to Unstoppable Stories That Move, a podcast with a purpose. Our mission is to raise money for medical research while shining a light on ordinary people who do extraordinary things, from everyday athletes and artists, scientists and survivors, caregivers and changemakers. These people relentlessly pursue their dreams, pushing through pain and setbacks. But why? Why do they do it? And what makes them unstoppable? I'm your host, Sally Hed Dahlquist. You can hear my story in episode 1. And now, stay tuned to listen as these seemingly normal people share their stories of resilience and inspire us to keep moving forward. Let's get to it. Hi, everyone. I'm Sally Hed Dahlquist, zooming in today from Afton, Minnesota. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm here today with the unstoppable Gregory David. Woo! Gregory is an everyday athlete. He is a photographer, a parachute jumper, a survivor. He's also a witness to history of apartheid as a white man growing up in South Africa in the 1970s and 80s. Then Gregory started his life over again by immigrating to the United States in 1986. While living in South Africa, Gregory discovered his passion for parachute jumping, and he has done over 4,000 parachute jumps. But his passion for parachute jumping almost killed him. In 1981, he literally hit a hard stop when one of his parachutes collapsed, causing him to free fall 60 feet and break his back. Wow. Gregory miraculously survived this injury and chose to heal without surgery, against the advice of his doctors, without a rod in his back, and to recover enough to live an active life and start parachuting again. He trained for 18 months to run a marathon in 3 hours and 20 minutes, but had to stop his long-distance running due to lingering issues with sciatica and other physical problems. Today, despite recurrent pain and some lingering issues, in his retirement, Gregory is still very active. He does swimming and yoga and squats. He even does one-legged squats. And he's always taking pictures and going skiing whenever he can find someone to take care of his dog, a golden retriever. And his wife even comes with him. So let's hear from Gregory. Hey, Greg, thanks for being on today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm not really sure that I'm as spectacular as you're hoping to make out here, but I'll do my best.
Wow. Well, we met through the 3M Ski Club here in Minnesota. And for those of you non-Minnesotans out there, 3M is the maker of Post-it notes and Scotch tape. Always a popular thing. Gregory and I have been on a few ski trips together over the years. You know, we went to Telluride last year, 2025, and this year at Copper Mountain. And Gregory is always the trip photographer. He takes his really good pictures. And we've talked a bit, but I didn't really know anything about your parachuting career or your accident until this last trip. And it just really struck me how much you embody the spirit of resilience, of being unstoppable. It's just nuts. I mean, for you, you're just doing what you got to do to survive and keep going. It's so humble about it, but it's really quite extraordinary.
It's what we all do, I guess.
Yeah. How did your journey begin? Like, how did you start parachuting? So parachuting was a passion you found. Yeah. And you've done over 4,000 parachute jumps now. I mean, that's not really a hobby. That's a calling. You've said that some of the really crazy guys have done like 15,000. So you've stood at that door 4,000 times. I mean, what does that feel like in that moment right before you step out of that plane? And has that feeling ever changed even after all this time? How did you get started doing this?
Yeah, well, the short story is how I got into it is that we had compulsory military service in South Africa, which came straight after school. And there were 2 intakes, and one was almost immediate, and the other one was delayed by 6 months. So I had 6 months to kill, and in that period, somebody who lived actually in the neighborhood, his uncle was a big skydiver, and he got a group of us together to go make a skydive. There were 10 of us. And yeah, so it was a little addictive. It was an immediate. I'd never done anything like that before. I had never had anything quite so frightening to deal with. But I mean, it was a bit like a mosquito going for the light, you know. I just, as scared as I was at the beginning, I just could not stop. It was not something that I could contemplate was stopping. So it was such a change in my life because I planned to go to university and become an architect. And all of that got put on hold.
Mm-hmm.
I found a job to support my habit, and I spent, well, basically the skydiving, the way we competed and the events and the whole thing changed dramatically in the first 3 years that I started, just when things were really starting to change. People were jumping military surplus equipment and stuff, but people were and jumping out of small door aircraft, and when they were doing relative work, which we call what in the old days we'd make a star formation, which is really a circle,
Mm-hmm.
and then that evolved to doing sequences of formations, and the event was originally was just how fast could you make this 10-man star to an 8-man event and a 4-man event where you had set sequences and a set working time. So how many sequences could you do in that working time? So it was quite an involvement.
So this was part of the World Championships?
Yeah, I got to, yeah, so the sporting side of it really developed. I mean, there was accuracy landing on a disc with, under canopy. There was an
Mm-hmm.
accuracy event, and then there was something called style, which involved a single person individual jumping out of an aircraft on a heading at quite high altitude, and then there would be judges with telescopes who would watch you perform a set sequence of maneuvers, which is basically like a 360 turn to the left, 360 turn to the right, a back loop, and then repeat that, and then there would be a mix of the two. And how fast could you do that? I mean, it's not easy to do it really fast, and I think the world record was somewhere around 5 seconds, or maybe tenths of a second less than that, which is just unbelievably fast. Yeah. So once there was the motivation of getting in a skydiving team, and that all that camaraderie that team members have with each other, and you have a goal to compete in a world championships or World Cup or something, and so you train and you find ways to pay for it, so sponsors and work and all the rest of it.
So your life at that time was really centered around this parachute jumping.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were distraught that I dropped this idea of going to school. And in fact, I
Yeah.
didn't actually go to school until I was 27, when I was living in the States at the time, and decided to go to film school. So,
What got you started in photography? It was your dad, right?
right, my father was an accountant, so these were hobbies of his, but he had photography, and then he bought a Bolex cinema camera, 16 millimeter camera. So he was a wildlife enthusiast. So there was all photos of and film of animals and birds, and he started recording them when the audio equipment got small enough. And so I learned both things from him at very early age. And photography I've pursued initially, but then got the opportunity to start shooting film. And the first film I shot was like of racing, motor car racings and stuff like that, because my dad's firm, Pete Mike Mitchell, had the audit of the race course and the organization, the race organization in South Africa. So I got these press passes, and I could go and film and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then very soon I started jumping still cameras. So those days some people jumped them, they put them on their arm with some kind of mount system, and they had, I mean, they would have to rewind the camera and press the button, which, yeah, very, very basic. But then the first camera I got was a Konica 35 millimeter fixed lens, and it had, I've at that time you could screw in a remote control. It's like a wire.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a housing with a wire on the inside that you push with your thumb, or you could squeeze a ball. It would work with pressure, air pressure. So
Before the days of a GoPro.
it's certainly, yeah. I mean, it's like incredibly different in those days. So when you started jumping cameras in a Nikon weighed like 6 pounds, they were heavy. And eventually, I guess around uh 73, I started jumping film cameras, which were gun cameras from fighter planes
Oh, really?
that used to, you've seen the historical footage of aircraft shooting down other aircraft, and
Yeah.
uh, that film was always shot with these little box gun cameras, and they had a film cartridge that you just slid into them, and when they pulled the trigger of the machine guns, then it also activated the camera.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so it progressed. Those weren't very good, but it progressed. I got a French camera, 16 millimeter camera called a Beaulieu that was electric. It had electric motor internally, and it was fairly light. And then so I'd be jumping that and a still camera, and I made money doing that for commercials and a couple of features, local features, anything like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, and what I did for a living was I was in the earth moving business. I joined a company that sold earth moving equipment, and I went through the sales training thing, and I was with them for nearly 5 years, and it was like almost a branch manager when I quit, much to their disappointment. But that's when I started, went overseas to the States and started running around shooting film and having a good time. Yeah, and then the one claim to fame was there was a movie, I guess it was shot in 78, so it would have got out in the cinemas in about 79, and it was called The Wild Geese, and it had Roger Moore and Richard Burton and, a whole bunch of big name dudes, and it was shot in South Africa in the north where it was really hot, and the movie was about these. So it's kind of like an English movie, and there was a head of a state, an African state, who was captured by some bad guys, and so the English, these were like mercenary guys who got banded together, and they flew in and jumped out of this plane and freed the president, and that was basically the story of the movie. So I went down there I was in film school by this stage. I was in LA, and I went back to shoot the aerial stuff, and they didn't really. I mean, I was using 16 millimeters, so it wasn't like James Bond or anything. People, I mean, I was there with this when they started that James Bond, or just before they started the James Bond stuff, and I was filming with the guy who actually did the first James Bond movies, and the camera, it was like 17 pounds.
Wow.
And it was big, and I was looking at this shit, and I was going, man, that's not healthy. So I wasn't really interested in jumping that much weight on my head because, I mean, really, really risky. I mean, if you had like a terminal velocity reserve shoot ride with that camera on your head, good luck. You might be dead with a broken neck. So.
Yeah.
And people they damaged their necks. I damaged my neck anyway, just jumping a 16 millimeter camera with a still camera in the front. Anyway, I shot this stuff, and they weren't really like so the crew and like the director of photography, I met them, and they were thinking I was kind of well, they didn't know what to think, and they didn't think they would get too much. But then they realized, hell, he knows what he's talking about. I mean, and I was showing them how, because on this, particular lens, I was actually using a rear mount filter, and I showed them how I'd made it and stuck it to the back, and they were impressed. And then because I knew what stops were and then the ratios and all this stuff, so then they were nice, and of course they used the footage, so it was in the movie, and yeah,
the wild geese.
The wild geese, yeah.
I'm gonna look that one up.
Yeah, it's not a lot of footage, but it was in. But so yeah, that was my early years, and then and so what I did, I'm telling you this because you're interested, right? I wouldn't normally tell people this stuff. So when I decided to skydive, I had to, I had to get a job to, pay for my habit.
Yeah.
And so I had a brother-in-law who worked for Cummins Diesel, and I was scrounging around looking, and Ian, his family had this a magazine that did car reviews and stuff like that. So I always used to help him with. We'd do all the stuff with the test the brakes, and the handling, all that, and the fuel consumption and everything. So I helped her with that, and I was working on my car, so I was kind of becoming a gearhead, and. So he said to me, there's a sister company of ours called Thomas and Taylor, and they sell Alice Chalmers bulldozers and front end loaders, and amongst other stuff. They tarmac, road construction machinery and backhoes, and well, anyway, so I went for an interview and I got a job. So that was what I did for nearly 5 years, and I went from, so it was this sort of a sales management kind of thing. So I started in the workshop, helping rebuild motors and, turbochargers and things like that. And then I used to do that on my own after a while. And then I went on field service. So I'd go out and service and repair bulldozers and on mines and on railway lines and in quarries and all that shit. So put on in the middle of the winter, put on a new track onto a like a 10-ton bulldozer, and it's like, geez. And then I was it was the whole thing. So I did the service department, the spares department, the warrant, all that, the warranty, the technology side, and then finally I was in the sales team. But before I started selling, we bought a seismograph, and I went out and used the seismograph to test areas like on road construction or railway construction. Let's say people also would bid on a section of railway, so they get 10 kilometers of railway line, and then so they're passing through higher areas that they have to, blast or rip with bulldozers and remove this material. And you could tell from the seismographs roughly. I mean, I wouldn't say it was exact, but you could get a good idea of how much blasting and how much ripping you would have to do. So that was that. And then towards the end of that, I was because I could see that they were grooming me to go and be a sales manager, and I was already living in I was living in Kimberley, and I was servicing this huge area of the Northern Cape and towards Southwest Africa, and it was so. I mean, I really loved driving through that wonderful areas that were wide open and very few, not a lot of people and stuff. And but I realized that I wasn't going to be the sales manager of a branch, and it wasn't my thing, So, and then I got lucky and sold a whole package of machines to mine, and I had so this is in 85. end of 85. And, my commission was about $9,000, which was quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I just stashed that. And then in early 86, I quit the buster there. They were just like, ooh. But I quit, and then I did the last World Cup in Southern Africa, and immediately after that, I went to the States.
Yeah.
And I was skydiving in the States, and that's how I met the people who did the James Bond people, because this was in California, and a place called Pope Valley, which was over the hill from St. Helena, very lovely part of the world that I spent some time in. And then I went on a trip with a guy. His grandmother had died and left him some land in Texas, and so we went on that trip, and we were in Austin, and we went to visit a buddy of his, and he was in film school, and we went to one of his classes, and then I went, well, that's what I should do.
Yeah.
I went back to California and made a little reel out of some of the film I'd been shooting, and then and I was late the only place was open to accept demo reels and stuff was Cal Arts, which is the Walt Disney School.
Okay.
So anyway, I submitted this thing and I got in. So I was there for a number of years.
Oh, cool.
So tell me about that. You went to film school in LA. You left everything behind you in 1986. Well, you were married to an American woman.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, your first wife. And so you're starting over in a country where you didn't have roots, but you had her family. So what was that like for you, after moving there compared to South Africa?
Well, it all revolved around work. So at the time that I moved, I had been in production in South Africa, peripherally in the feature business, but they were few and far between. And just like Hollywood, it's hard to get in. And it wasn't really something that I could see supporting me. But as soon as advertising started on television, and I have to say that South Africa, for political reasons, didn't get television until 1976. And they started with 5 African dialects and English and Afrikaans. So there were 7 languages they broadcast, which is like crazy, but it was a really good money-making opportunity from a point of view of commercials, because every commercial you made had to be, dubbed and modified to work in 7 languages, which all had different lengths of how to say something. So some things were like packed in with the verbiage, and the others were very sparse. So,
but you grew up in South Africa, right? 1970s and 1980s.
Yeah, I was born in 52 and left in 86.
52. You saw this. You lived through this apartheid and watching some violence erupt around you, and you started planning your escape. What was that moment you said to yourself, I'm not staying here. I can't stay here anymore?
So it happened that I was about to buy this post-production that I was running, this post-production company. And then my largest client, who I'd worked with previously in-house as their editor, asked me to join them to direct commercials because they were moving into feature films. And so I thought that was like I'd skip the post-production side and just moved straight into directing. So I gave up the idea of buying the company and joined them. And they were in the final stages of preparing to shoot their first big feature film, which Warner's was going to distribute worldwide. And then the final uprising happened in 85. And then, South African product, it was, just like a pariah country at that time. And so the feature got cancelled. The banks had pulled their notes. The country went into a serious economic decline. And I was caught between not having bought this post-production company, but not getting any work as a fledgling director.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also bought a home that was a fixer-up. It had great potential, but it needed an awful lot of work. And of course, I didn't have the money. And I just felt at that time that if I was going to start again, I wasn't going to start again in South Africa, because at that point, it really looked like we were heading for civil war.
So I just have a cursory understanding of South African politics and
Yeah.
race relations there. What was your takeaway message, do you think? Was there a lot of Black businesses being supported, or were they able to thrive at all?
Well, here's the thing is that, apartheid basically means separate development.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was that you would take a population of 30 million, well, it wasn't that many, it's like 25 million Black people and 2 million white people, and then you would control them. You would keep them out of the political process.
Mm-hmm.
They would have no vote, and then you would control their movements. So they established homelands that were loosely around the African languages, right? It's like Zulu, Xhosa, and Sotho, and Tswana, and Venda, and all these things. So, and then they were sort of traditional areas, and then they made up shit, and then all the Black people. First of all, they went around and designated whether people were white or Black, and then everybody, all the Black people, were registered as belonging to this state or that state that they had created. And then you would have to have pass documents if you left your home area, and you
Really?
did that to work, because there was no work in these rural areas. I mean, you could just be a farmhand, and that was about it, or make ornamental wooden carving shit, and then.
Yeah.
And then you were then they would, so you would go to the mines or industrial work, and the mines were a big thing. And they had, so Soweto, which is the southwest townships, and other places, people were had to go to these. They stayed in Soweto, but a lot of people were. They were segregated even, like so that especially the Black guy. I mean the men, because they were mostly the workers who did the mines and stuff. They were segregated, and the roads into these townships were controlled, and so it was a whole management thing. And so here comes the business side of it, is that Black people were not allowed to have businesses at all, even in their townships. It was
Really?
illegal. The Black people had to buy from the white people.
Really?
Yeah. So, of course, there were, businesses in the townships, and they couldn't really stop it, because it was just like in the war. If you need to do something, you do it, and then you keep it hidden from the controllers. And so there was an underground network. I mean, there were people who made clothes, and people who repaired clothes, and shoemakers, and people who repaired cars, and there were even dry cleaners, and of course there were bars and stuff like that, and supermarkets, but all hidden. And then so this was around the time that they started to loosen the rules a little bit, because the pressure from the world was on. It was like really big time, but it still hadn't gotten to the point where there was there was like riots that started in the schools, and that happened in 85. And I was actually making this documentary at the time, and I was 3/4 the way through it, And I was, we were shooting in Soweto one day. We were actually just shooting B-roll, where it was like there was this tower on a high point in Soweto. So we were shooting B-roll, or, shots of the township,
Yeah.
And then there was a school nearby, and suddenly there was shouting and screaming and dogs barking and gunshots, and then all these kids were swarmed over the playground and then up over the fences, and the police were chasing people and beating them with shamrocks and all the stuff. And so that's when the riots started. We were right there, and we finished the film. It was like really kind of difficult, but we did.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left the country the following year because at that time, or just before that, I had given up the company. I was about to buy the company that I'd started working at.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who owned it had moved on, and somebody else had taken it over, and he moved on. And then the business was owned by a newspaper. And that's another long story, but the newspapers started thinking that newspapers would die, so they were looking for diversity, and they actually ended up, getting involved with a big video facility, the first big video facility in South Africa. But because of the nature of the editing business, where there wasn't any really goodwill, because the attraction of going to a post house was how good the agencies thought you were. So,
Okay.
so if you sucked, you wouldn't get any work, right? So anyway, so my big client that I'd worked with previously as in-house in production as an editor. They asked me. They said they were going to shoot feature film now, and they wanted me to shoot commercials for them. And they got me a really good producer, and so I started working for them. I gave up the company, and somebody else bought it almost immediately. And then the state of emergency hit, and the movie was like 1 week from production, with Warner's was doing the distribution, and they turned around and said, "Sorry, no South African product." So, the shit hit the fan.
Right.
And I'd bought a house, a fixer-upper house that had a lot of potential, but it needed a lot of work. And so the market was turned upside down. I was like upside down on my house. I didn't have a business, and I was kind of floundering, and I went, fuck.
Yeah.
I was married to an American. I'd met her in Switzerland, and she came to live in South Africa. So I left because I could, and got here in the November of '86.
And now you're a U.S. citizen, right?
Yeah, I'm a citizen in '91. And then the other part of that question was, what was it like coming here? Well, I had $6,000 in my pocket and a wife and 2 kids and 2 cats when I moved here. And so everything revolved around getting work. And I had a reel from everything I'd done in South Africa. So I went to LA and New York and Chicago. Those were the main cities. I went to a couple of others, but LA was completely freelance, and New York was to some extent freelance. And I was offered a job for a really good starting salary, or base pay, and that was it. I went for it. So I was in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 24 years, and that job, was fantastic. It was like there was one of the 2 top companies in Chicago, and things went really well for me. So it was very exciting to come here, and my success in the film industry in South Africa just seemed to just keep going up like a rocket in this country too. A little later, there were a few hiccups. Things changed. We went through the digital revolution.
Oh, yeah.
And so originally when we started this, we edited film on great big editing machines, and we had mag tracks that ran in sync, and it was technical. The only way to get into the industry was through an apprenticeship. The equipment was pretty arcane and then, expensive, and not everybody had it. So, not everybody could do that. There were very few people. Of course, now you can edit a feature on your phone, so things have changed somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's quite a change too, to see that evolution of the film
Yeah.
industry.
And I was really like part of that whole thing. I was like a very early adopter of random access editing. I'm sure you remember laser discs. There's like 12-inch discs that you could
Mm-hmm.
rent or buy and watch a feature film,
Yeah.
and so my first editing machine was a modified tape editing edit machine system controller, which ran 6 of these laser machines. So there'd be 6 copies of the same thing. And then the machine would decide where it could retrieve the piece of video that I wanted to play. And of course, as you know, timeline editing came in at that time. So it was just an edit decision. Let's play this from here, then to there, and then this from here to there. And then if you wanted something in between, you just change the edit list rather than re-recording stuff on tape, which is dramatically better than videotape because it was random. Yeah, random access.
Mm-hmm. So you were able to combine your two loves, photography and jumping out of planes, and it turned into actual film work.
It did, yeah. I mean, it wasn't like a career change. I mean, there were people who actually pushed into that area, with aerial photography and helicopters and all that stuff. But they were jumping like huge cameras, and I just thought that was too risky.
Yeah.
From my point of view, is like, yeah, I did stuff that was, potentially dangerous, but there was a lot of forethought involved, and also a lot of avoiding of potential, damage or death. Definitely was scared of not. I didn't have an irrational fear of dying or hurting myself, but it was there. Every time you jumped out of a plane, you did have to have an open parachute before you got to the ground. Otherwise, the results would be catastrophic.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So walk me through that time when you remember your parachute failed, not like the medical part, but the moment itself. What did you think in those 60 feet when you were falling?
Well, as I ran into turbulence right near the ground. I was shooting an accuracy approach because we were having a money event the next weekend. So I was kind of deep in the brakes, and I ran into this turbulence, and the drop zone was surrounded on 2 sides by trees, which kind of made things worse. And anyway, one moment I was, coming in for this landing, and the next moment, one side of the parachute folded in, and so the parachute began to spin. Well, immediately spun. I was trying to recover it, and then I realized I wasn't going to recover it, and I tried to get my legs underneath me to break my fall, but not very successfully. So I went from my heels to my butt and compressed, 4 vertebrae in my spine, bruised my kidneys and, ribs, that kind of stuff.
Oh, well, that does sound like some success to me.
Yeah, well, I survived, and I wasn't paralyzed. So not being paralyzed was the miracle because of the substantial damage to my vertebra. When they did take the x-rays, they were astounded that I could, I still had feeling and movement in my legs.
Yeah, and the doctors recommended this surgery, this Harrington rod, and you said no. I mean, that's radical act of listening to your own body over what these experts are saying.
Yeah, it didn't come quickly, but so I was diagnosed with an unstable fracture, and they put me into traction, which there was going to be 5 weeks, so I stabilized and recovered enough for them to do the surgery and put the rod in, which would have involved actually 3 vertebrae in between, and then the vertebra above and below that, so 5 vertebrae.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, they just told me that, and I said, yeah, whatever it takes to get me out of here.
Right.
But when I had recovered enough to realize that I was starting to get a little bit of movement back, and maybe I wasn't quite as unstable as they were saying, but the pain in my knees from the traction became worse than the actual injury. So
Mm-hmm.
when the head surgeon came through on their rounds, they did it once a week. I said to him I didn't think I was unstable, and could they take me out of traction? And essentially, after watching me move around in the bed, he decided, well, let's take the traction off and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just add here that I'd already seen what a Harrington rod looks like in a spine, because the guy next to me, who had broken most of the bones in his body from a really bad motorcycle accident, had one. And I'd asked the nurse to bring his x-rays over to me, and I saw what was involved, and I realized that, any idea of using my body the way it was supposed to be used would be over with that kind of contraption in my back. So that was shocking. And so that night after they took the traction off, I sat up in the bed with using the little pulley above the bed to hoist myself up, and I sat there. It was painful and a little disorientating, because I hadn't sat up in some time. But I decided then and there, was like, if I could sit up in the bed, then I would lie on my back as long as it took to recover, but I wasn't going to have the surgery and put the Harrington rod in. And that's basically what happened. They eventually sent me home in a brace. They built a brace. I went home in an ambulance, and I spent I'd been in hospital for a month, and I spent another 6 weeks just lying around trying to heal. And then slowly, obviously the trips to the bathroom and the bath were, kind of mandatory. I mean, I had bed baths for a while, but I had to go to the bathroom. And yeah, so slowly walking and moving and bending, came back. And yeah, within a year, I went on a ski trip to Switzerland.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of work there, rehab, gyms, all that stuff.
Is that where you met your first wife?
Straight after that, went from one trouble to another trouble. Well, we loved each other, and our children were, born in love, conceived in love, and the marriage lasted 11 years. Things happen. Sometimes marriages work at the time of the marriage, but as time passes, it's not a good thing to stay together. And, that was it.
Yeah, things change.
Yeah.
And that's tough too. Yeah, so that's, that type of resilience is kind of talked about like a personality trait. Like some people have it and some people don't. You've had to rebuild your life several times, recovering from this accident, leaving your home country, rebuilding after a divorce. What do you actually think resilience is from the inside? We've also had car accidents and little plane accidents too.
Yeah. Well, that would go back to, a life philosophy. When I was a child, when I went to school, basically when I got into high school and I was a teenager, there was something in me. I did not like authority. And it was a church school. I was at the Church of England, so there were priests and divinity and this stuff. And I sort of bought it for a while because I was 5 years old. I went to the same school for all my school years. And you your superiors, the adults in the room, they tell you how life is. And some people see occasionally the glimpse of, that what you're being told is not true. That was apparent to me. I mean, from history, from the way our country started to behave with, with black people as a tiny white minority forcing rule and control over a massive black population. And that became something that was clearly wrong. From a religion point of view, what I didn't get the things that maybe a true believer would have gotten, the faith thing. I was pretty much a doubting Thomas until the point where I felt that I had tried quite a lot, but I wasn't seeing it return on investment. And so I bailed from that. The school taught me, it was a church school. They try to have you believe in God and all this stuff, but I didn't. And there were a lot of things I didn't like, but I did learn critical thinking. I mean, they taught me how to think rather than giving. The education wasn't as valuable as being able to use my mind, and the school helped with that. So being somewhat of a rebel and somewhat of an outsider, I rather did what I wanted to do as opposed to what somebody told me I ought to do. And becoming good at something and proving a point was, a big thing in my life because, in school, I was never being really that great at anything. I was a good tennis player. I played cricket. I played rugby. I played hockey. I swam. I played squash, but never to the point where I was on, sometimes I was a reserve on school teams, but there was always somebody better than me, which was kind of annoying. And later on in my life, I started to discover other capacities that I had not discovered at school yet or anything yet. Well, those were really interesting to me, and I pursued them. I don't know quite if that answered the question, but
so resilience, you're not really following what everybody's telling you to do.
Right.
You're finding you can make your own opinion, your own life.
Skydiving was an opportunity to learn a developing sport with some like-minded people. And we were very successful. The group of people that I started with, we won all the championships, we were just the best. But there were people in the world, especially the Americans, who were so far ahead of us that we were, we didn't think that we were the greatest thing since bubblegum, but we were learning from other people. But the success that we had was really exciting. And the camaraderie that we had was terrific. Those years were wonderful. And even my early years in the United States with the company that I was working with, I have some great friendships from that first company, lifelong friendships. So those things are important to me.
Yeah, you didn't just read about apartheid in a history book. You lived it inside and out as a kid and a young adult. And you kind of watch what happens when a government decides certain people don't count. As someone who is a witness to that history, how does that shape what you see happening in the world today?
Well, I left South Africa for America because America was more stable, and at that time it was. But I was a little naive and probably lacking in having read American history. It's quite similar. I mean, we wiped out the American Indian here.
Yeah.
Took all the lands. And it's an interesting thing because, and this is probably contentious, but, Israel I consider as an apartheid state because there was a tiny little piece of land that the British created, called it Israel, immediately after the war. And no sooner had they inhabited, and of course the power that was running what was Israel then, went straight into conflict with the locals. I'm not going to give a history lesson here, but what's happened in Palestine and their behavior and, well, the conflict in the world right now is, really a lot worse than what happened in South Africa, which is quite surprising to say.
Yeah, you'd think we'd learn from some of these lessons. You have these tribal groups of people who don't have their own land, and yet there's a country around them. Like, even in Asia, you see this with Tibet and the Shan people and the Hmong people, and I'm sure all the many other tribal people who don't have their own country, but have to exist, like you said, exactly like the Native Americans in the United States with the tribal reservations.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I'm talking about a time that was a long time ago. I'm just short of 74 years old, and I've had a lot of time to think, and I've read a lot of very smart people writing about topics that have influenced me a lot. And human behavior is habit forming. We have myths handed down to us, until 5,000 years ago, or a little bit before that. There wasn't really written language, so everything was passed on by memory, and those memories were preserving the life system of how to live in accordance with the planet and nature, and the rules amongst themselves. And and that's a kind of a habit. So from the origination of these myths, then they're followed, passed on down, and they learned to do what was passed down. And so if you think about people who gravitate to power, they have that habit. They're always after power. They don't see the ways of coming to terms with issues in a non-violent fashion, and they haven't changed. But the planet has changed because it's so much smaller now, and the weapons are so much more devastating. And so we are able to, damage the world in spite of not using nuclear weapons. We are damaging our economy. We're ruining nations, people's lives, their families' lives, the economies of nations. And the responsibility grows, but the capacity to approach that responsibility has not. We're at a turning point. It's the liminal point of our planet is now. I mean, with the war and, well, the wars that are going on, so I don't have to mention them all, but when you find out of the atrocities that are happening and the need that's there. I mean, I used to Doctors Without Borders and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I used to, dump a lot of money into that, into politics and all this stuff. But I don't anymore because it's. I do a little, but not much. And I sort of also my values. Not with that kind of donation that you're talking about, but politics. No more money to politics. It's like. I realized a lot of the things is like it was sort of the stuff that was supporting the environmental things.
Yeah.
I realized I was pissing my money against the wall. So
Yeah.
I don't know what your philosophy is or what your. If you think of the human race, we've obviously been on this planet for longer than the 6,000 years that you learned at school, So, and I know that, the Atlantis and Lemuria and whatever else that, existed before that huge thing that happened, the Younger Dryas happened in 12,500 years ago, when we had just like huge physical upheavals on the planet that just wiped that stuff away. But there's also, defining it, it's just that the current geologists and historians and everything, not so much the geologists, but certainly the archaeologists and historians, they've got this thing down and they'd lose face, So there's that battle of actually adjusting history according to what we know now. But if you think about it, is that the human race, as long as we know, which could reach back, say, 12,000 years. We've all been functioning on this fear and power basis,
Mm-hmm. Modern man evolved about 100,000 years ago. So the people we have today are pretty much exactly the same as we were 100,000 years ago.
Yeah.
The advent of
Yeah.
farming and was about 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had the same capacity. And some people talk about genetic mutations about 200,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But were done by aliens.
Oh, yeah, I love the alien story.
Yeah.
Aliens, yeah. Yeah, why not?
But yeah, why not? It's just like, because I actually realized that from a spiritual point of view, or maybe not so much a spiritual point of view, but I have been a kind of a studied and a student of some philosophy, but more involved with consciousness. And I came to it by reading. Just the easy, Dummy's Guide to Quantum Physics kind of stuff. So I did that, and then I started realizing that the spaces in between these particles were kind of as vast as we have galaxies in space, and that these things were potentials rather than things, and they had different behaviors that a little bit about quantum physics. That there's the particle wave duality. That it is one thing or it's another thing depending on how you look at it, and in fact, it's been proven that just the very thing of examining something and looking at something changes it, and that there's this like entanglement that happens with particles that change in a particle here that has been entangled with this particle that have somehow scientifically removed to some large distance, and then when there's a change here, it's an instant change there. And telepathy and all the stuff of the psychic phenomena of people knowing when somebody dies or when somebody's in trouble, or the coincidental things that are become absurd to think that they are coincidental.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot going on. So, and I've been meditating since the 80s off and on. And there's been a huge resurgence in in spirituality and conscious research, and then just the surfacing of people who are so psychic and like these channel people. I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff on YouTube, but there are a lot of people who talk with the angels and the archangels and with aliens, and they're different types of people. They're mediums who go into trances. They're people who channel, who allow the consciousness of the other party to enter, so they kind of speak through them, and it's a bit like a medium, but the speech, the way of the speech changes, and the inflections and the pace and everything. And also the stuff that they talk about. I would say it's impossible for these people to come up with this stuff.
Yeah.
And also, there are ones that actually will have it going on in their heads, and then they'll so it's almost like an interface. They talk, and then so ideas are projected into people's minds. So from my point of view, having watched a vast amount of this stuff, I think there's some fire where the smoke is. So now my contribution is to change myself. So, and it's actually very hard to change yourself, because it's one thing is to meditate. You get your breathing, you get yourself into a space, and things happen. Things have not dramatic things, but things have happened for me, so that enough to know that I'm on the right track. But to maintain that throughout your day, to be, just aware all the time and neutral, so that no matter what happens, you don't interact with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like a hard task. But for people who can remain neutral, I was just getting some statistics, and I don't know how they do it, but that people who remain neutral. So, in other words, like with Trump and with the war, and even with the anguish of people dying who shouldn't be dying, and the misery that they're causing to the children and stuff, to remain neutral is a stage beyond courage, when they have a whole hierarchy of levels of consciousness. And then and they're saying that people who, I don't know, so let me put it this way: if you have people like the yogis, who people go and are around them, and when they come into the presence of these people, they feel the power of it. It's just like the acceptance and the love and all the stuff, and people feel it. It's because we are sensitive beings. I mean, maybe there are some people who don't feel it, but they're
right.
But people who are tuned, who are sensitive, are going to feel that, and they gravitate to it, and they start learning from. They become disciples of the Swami or the whatever. And I've learned about how there are these so in terms of time, we live this, the era of time we're in the present all the time, but the present becomes the past. And we also can deduct the future in a certain way, right? Because stuff that happened today is not the stuff that's going to happen tomorrow. We know that. I mean,
correct.
So there's this long linear thing, and it's time. If you look at the universe, it's like 13.5 billion years old. But there are those who say that actually outside of our three-dimensional time continuum-based life, that there is no time, or the time is extremely different, and that so largely the lives that we've had in the past or will have in the future are actually all instantaneous, all happening in the same moment, since there's no time. So there's only one thing happening, but fractals of it, and on different, well, they call it timelines. And so you can jump timelines.
So that stuff is harder for me to visualize. Yeah.
Well, this is a long way around of going towards how we change the world to be not a fear-based, power-based survival of the fittest thing, and make it be equality, and that people are more sensitive and open to everybody else. And so, and I can't do that any other way than by meditating.
You can only control yourself.
Yeah, that's it. So, and you have a hard enough time, changing your own thing. I'm fine. Yeah, it's because so the things that are wrong with me are, like I'm kind of controlling in the way I see things. So this is the way to do it. And if somebody wants to do it another way, there could be some discussion about that.
Your way or the highway.
And since Kenna is completely different to me, we have that. And so so the people who are nearest to you are test you the most, and so I've been schooling myself with some success, and that neutrality thing is, I don't know who said this, but they said between stimulus and reaction, so in terms of a interaction with people or whatever, lies opportunity. So in other words, if you don't react like with an immediate punch or fuck you, the people who I mean, I know you see people who are good at those, the ones that are adjudicators of dialogues and stuff. You have mediators and stuff, and everybody sort of stays calm. There's no raised voices, and so you can actually make progress by staying calm, not having your blood pressure go up, and they get becoming tunnel vision. And
Yeah.
so you keep people's minds open enough to entertain, more than one idea at a time. You make some progress. So I mean, it's not rocket science. But it's for me, it's rocket science. So I'm having to learn it in my old age.
Yeah. My goal is to understand all sides. I can see the logic and the emotion of all the opinions, and both sides are right, and everybody loses and with a lot of the actions that are happening.
Yeah. So the thing is that it is that you have to be empathetic as to what the other people, why they are feeling the way they do and why they feel so strongly about it. And
Yeah.
then you have to compromise, which we used to have a little bit of that in our government, but not anymore.
So many things going on there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's an interesting time because it's like, if I was like a religious person, I'd be pretty much certain that, we're in end days,
I'm not going to go that far.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
but it is, I mean, never before have we had these sets of situations because there's communication like we've not had before. And there is power, huge power in the hands of the tiniest amount of people, and they're not doing what they're doing to help you. There's it's it's like a dog eat dog world, and winner takes all, and we're right on the edge of people going, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, I'm sure.
And that's when you have big changes.
Yeah.
Big upheavals,
Rapid changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, we were just in Hiroshima and got some tours of where the A bomb dropped and talked to some of the survivors there, and they were saying, it was just so horrific of what happened to their country, the people in those towns, that it's just absolutely a crime against humanity, and that no war is worth it. It ruins everybody's lives. Again, nobody's a winner when you have these wars. And then I ran this marathon in Indiana. It's called the Victory Marathon near Dana, Indiana. And this marathon is run on the old ammunition plant. And they said they had made enough poison weapons that even at that time, we could kill every bit of life on Earth 400 times over. In Indiana, there was stockpiles of all this horrible chemicals. And I just think that's just the United States. Oh, well, what do other countries have that it could just devastate everybody?
Yeah, it's crazy because we know that the planet is not particularly stable because the continents have moved and we have mountain ranges and depressions and stuff like that. And so the planet is just by fact geologically active, and if we have any kind of disruption, like large earthquakes in those areas, that stuff will escape. The radioactivity, the poisons. It's nuts.
Yeah, you wonder about that with the Fukushima nuclear plant when they had that earthquake.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of trust in the powers that be beyond you, of the people who are taking care of these things, and people don't really want to trust the governments anymore. You feel like the cog in the wheel, the little man, the pawn in politics.
Yeah, it's really a waiting game because our current government is, I mean, the leadership is insane, and yet they are allowed to continue, and it's like anathema to me and to most people, I would say.
Yeah. So maybe we should pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
we don't want people knocking on your door.
what's next for you? What's on your bucket list?
Yeah, the bucket list. Well, that's changed a lot. Most of it was, you know, visiting places in the world and skiing exotic places.
Yeah.
So, well, not a lot. It hasn't changed dramatically. I mean, there are some things that are obviously less necessary. It's like people who want to climb Everest. I gave up. I gave up that idea as ridiculous some time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, it seems that that's an important thing to do, but I've managed to find my resilience in less dangerous ways than climbing Everest. So for me, my bucket list is basically to improve myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's working on my state of being, on how I can be considerate and compassionate, and all those words, and also not become reactive to in the face of people behaving extremely badly.
Yeah.
It's the matter of learning to be somewhat detached from it. Don't attach to it. Don't let that emotional violence, they can hit you in the face, but don't allow the emotional violence to your psyche. And to achieve that takes some work, I think. And I'm busy doing it.
Yeah, I try not to get emotionally involved in problems.
It's much healthier.
Yeah. Especially for things like, if the lawnmower breaks, there's really no one to get mad at when that happens. It just happens. You just got to fix it.
It's like I'll do this, more often than I would like to admit. So I'll show up at the supermarket, go get everything I need, and then go to checkout and find that I don't have my wallet in my pocket. And I used to get so mad at myself, and just be steaming. Now I just say to the cashier, would you mind if stashing this card off to the side here? I'm going to go get my wallet. And then I go home, I get my wallet, and I go back and get the groceries. And well, yeah, it took 25 minutes more time, but so what? I go on with my day.
You still have groceries. You can still buy them.
Yeah.
Life is good. Life is good. Well, I suppose we should wrap it up. I really appreciate you being on the show. And I'm glad we got a chance to talk a lot more on the ski trip. I love hearing your story, how you survived. You're so resilient, and you just don't give up when things are tough. And you've lived through a lot of tough things. So I've got kind of two final questions for you. Is what's your purpose?
Yeah, it's a hard thing, because when you ask yourself that question early on in life, it's hard to answer. And I think most people answer that with what it is they want to be. Like, if I want to be a doctor, that's my purpose. If you were a knight in the Middle Ages and you were given a quest, and your quest would be your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I've always really been a little confused about my purpose in life, but how I approach purpose now is to try to be as open as possible to the possibilities that present themselves to me. And then if I find that exciting, then I would, engage with that and see what happens. So that is, well, more about what I do. My purpose is really just to get better at it,
Mm-hmm.
better at life, better at living a full life, be present, that sort of thing. It's a sort of a philosophical approach to it.
Yeah, it's that bigger picture, with doctors, they want to save people. And even Knights on a Quest, that was all about saving people, and living life to the fullest and being present, I think, is a part of way of enjoying the life that you have, appreciating being here, and the happier that you are and the more joy that you share
That's
helps
right.
everyone else too.
Yeah. So getting up in the morning and being excited at a coming day,
Yeah.
having gratitude for the things that you have and the people that you have and the animals you have.
Mm-hmm.
The simple things in life are the most important. Things
Yeah.
come and go, but when you establish love and relationships, those are part of your psyche, and they stretch over time. If you make a book, you make a book. And once it's made or written and printed, it sits on the shelf and could disintegrate because it was more of an object. I mean, these objects are in our consciousness, but the thing that is closer to your consciousness, the non-material part of human life is the most important. It's your emotions, your feelings, your capacity for love. Yeah.
My wise lawyer, Bill Skolnick, once said to me, if money solves your problem, it's not really a problem.
That's right.
I love that. Just what you said, the love and relationships are most important. Then my final question for you is, what makes you unstoppable? You still ski, you still enjoy life, even though you have to manage pain and ongoing issues with injuries over time. What makes you unstoppable?
I'm unstoppable because I exist. That is qualified by how I have learned the skills I've learned that have helped me understand being conscious. And, my belief is that doesn't stop and that each life is transitory. So it's a continuum, and that makes me definitely unstoppable.
Are you afraid of death?
I don't think there is death.
Yeah, I think your answer is no. You're not.
No, I'm not afraid of death. If there was death, I would. Well, philosophy is, I used to think that my belief system was somewhat, and I'm changing this thing, but I'll just let me go into this. So my original belief when I formed my spiritual idea of what I was, I would explain it with this picture of, think of a wave coming in onto shore with an offshore breeze blowing and the sun is shining and the wind flicks up the foam and the spray off the top of the wave, and it goes up into the air several feet and it's glinting in the sunlight and then falls back into the ocean. And I think of my life like being one of those little pieces of water that have separated from the ocean and has gone for a short period and up into the light and then dropped back into the ocean. And so I've kind of thought that the identity would go with that when you went back into the ocean, that you were just one of the great potential of creation again. Yeah, I think that individual identity is still an integral part of the consciousness that defines you.
I love it. I'm part of the wave. We can all be part of the wave of life. Thanks for tuning into this episode. If this story hits home, please share it with your friends. Subscribe, support the podcast, leave a review, sign up for the Unstoppable newsletter, or send me a message. I would really love to hear from you. And if you want to do something even bigger, donate now. Support our mission to raise $1 million for medical research. You can donate online at unstoppablestoriesthatmove.com or mail a check to P.O. Box 12, Afton, Minnesota 55001, USA. We can't get there without help from listeners like you. Together, we can save lives. I'm your host, Sally Hed Dahlquist. Thanks again for listening and keep moving forward.